drugs, or ideas, what you consume influences who you become. On the Mind and Matter podcast, we learn together from the best scientists and thinkers alive today about how your mind-body reacts to what you feed it. Before starting Mind and Matter, I spent 10 years in academia doing scientific research. I got a PhD in neuroscience where I focused on neuroendocrinology and the neurobiology of behavior, and before that, I specialized in molecular, developmental, and evolutionary genetics. I use my scientific background to help parse and translate the information that guests share on the podcast. In addition to the podcast, I write long-form written content inspired by the show where I integrate what I've learned across episodes. I also have a free weekly newsletter where I provide you with upcoming guests, share links, and provide commentary on scientific studies and research that I'm reading, and more. Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. You are about to listen to the full episode, but there will be 1 to 2 short ads immediately following this before the conversation. If you would like to hear ad-free episodes and get early access before they release more widely, become a paid subscriber at the Mind and Matter Substack at mindandmatter.substack.com. Becoming a paid subscriber is a way to directly support my efforts, allowing me to make more episodes and higher quality episodes, and also helping to free up my time so that I can spend more of it on doing research and synthesizing results from the podcast and from the literature so that I can do more things like writing on the Substack, putting more content into the newsletter, and getting these things out more frequently. So if you want to support the show and get ad-free episodes, go to mindandmatter.substack.com. Hey everyone, I want to take just a minute to tell you about a really cool health monitoring device I've been using called Lumen. It's a handheld, pocket-sized device with a sleek design. The Lumen device measures CO2 levels in your breath, which allows their technology to determine the extent to which your body is burning fats versus carbohydrates. Lumen helps improve your metabolic flexibility, your body's efficiency in shifting between using fats and carbs for energy. I use this device in the morning or before bed or after meals or after workouts to track my metabolism. With just a couple weeks of use, I learned a lot about which foods were causing my body to burn mostly fat, mostly carbs, or both, as well as how long I needed to fast and how hard I needed to exercise to promote fat burning. Being able to track whether your body is burning fat versus carbs will help you figure out how your body responds to your lifestyle and whether or not your weight loss and fitness strategies are actually working. Lumen is great for anyone looking to optimize their health for either weight loss or athletic performance. Their easy-to-use app allows you to track your results together with what you're eating and how you're exercising, and it syncs with other devices like the Apple Watch. Click the link in the episode description to learn more and use the code MINDMATTER, MINDMATTER, to get 10% off your Lumen device today. That's on top of the site-wide sale they are currently running, and the Lumen device is eligible to be paid for with FSA and HSA health accounts. Check out the link in the episode description for more info. Just so they know who's speaking here.
Sure. I'm Dr. Brian Kerley. I am a family medicine trained, currently practice as a hospitalist physician. I'm notable on the internet as the seed oil disrespecter, a doctor with a meme account. I've got a fun story why I did that we could get into if you want to, but that's why I've been invited on the podcast to talk about the topic, because I've brought a lot of attention to it happily.
Yeah. And you're interesting in a couple of different ways, but you are a physician. You're trained as a physician. You've been a family doctor. You're a hospice doctor. So you come at it with that kind of training.
Hospitalist.
Oh, hospitalist. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. So hospice, just in case there's any medical folks out there, being kind of an end of life type of thing. Hospitalist is actually a relatively new discipline. It used to be your family physician kind of came by and saw you at the hospital when you're there. There's just too many sick people now to do that. So a hospitalist, if you go to what I tell people, everyone knows what an ER doctor is, right? Mm-hmm. If you go to the ER and you're not going home, the hospitalist comes down and says, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and you're going to come in with us. So we admit people to the hospital, we progress them day to day. And then when everything's stable to leave, we discharge them. And then, so we're like your primary care in the hospital. We bring in the cardiologist and this general surgeon or cardiothoracic surgeon, neurologist, So it's the end of the funnel for all of the reason why we're even talking about these topics is because of diseases and the harm and the death that they cause. So my day-to-day work is the end of the funnel.
Yeah.
Like when did that COPD end you up at the hospital, or that cancer or that heart disease or that heart attack or things like that? So
Yeah. Yeah. So your job,
that's why it's personal.
yeah, you're seeing the people that are not being discharged. They would, in a different time, a different
Yeah,
place,
exactly.
maybe
Yeah,
they wouldn't
yeah,
be coming through the funnel
yeah.
so much and so
Sure.
often.
Yep. Yeah. And you can be sick and be discharged from the ER, but there's, that's an interesting kind of medical perspective that I could get into if it was relevant. But yeah, I heard a surgeon once use the phrase end of the funnel, right? Because surgery is even more so the end of the funnel. Like something is so bad that they're involved now, right? And there's a lot of things going on. So
Yeah. And so, I mean, presumably you would have had some kind of specialty in your training, but I mean, would you describe yourself as a generalist? Do you have a specialty?
Yeah. So family medicine is more of the traditional generalist, right? Mm-hmm. We do everything from we don't use the term deliver babies anymore. Moms deliver. We catch babies. So I've done everything from catch babies to intubate, people that are dying in an ICU, right, or very critical, everything in between. So I think my patients have been everywhere from prenatal to over 100 years old.
Yeah. And so, obviously I know you, and many people listening might know you from your meme account online, which means you are a physician who got interested in diet and got interested in certain parts of the diet nutrition discourse. And I often hear on the internet ad nauseum people say, we don't teach nutrition in medical school. So I'm presuming you didn't really get a lot of diet nutrition education in medical school. And so can you talk a little bit about what kind of got you down this path of thinking about food and nutrition as a physician if it wasn't your formal training?
It's actually the exact opposite. I was an internet rabbit hole nutrition guy in my early 20s. So probably about 20 years ago. I'm 42. So when I was in my early 20s, I found myself spending in this, and I did a business degree out of I met my wife in community college and finished a business degree, and was working for my dad's sign company. So something completely unrelated to medicine. But just like a lot of the folks that would be listening to a podcast like this, I was spending hours and hours doing things that were completely unrelated to my job, right? Nothing I was making money off of, nothing that was even, it wasn't always relative to my, it wasn't like I was researching a disease that I had or something, but certain topics like, because I found a lot of people can relate to this. I found CrossFit in the late 2000s, and they had a pretty famous nutrition angle, right? They talked a lot about, that's where paleo got very, got popular through YouTube and folks like Rob Wolf. Notably, that's where I learned the concept of an autoimmune disease. And I think that was probably the event horizon, because it was around that time, like I knew my mom was diagnosed with celiac disease, right? But it wasn't like she was on death's doorstep. It was just something kind of interesting, like, oh, what is celiac disease? And why is everyone talking about gluten?
Right.
And so that, that and ketogenic diets. And when I learned that you could treat epilepsy with a ketogenic diet, like I remember I was shadowing at the Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. I knew about epilepsy and ketogenic diets, and the neurologist didn't, right?
Yeah.
And so in those first few years of like, I think I want to go to medical school, even just from a personal reason, like a career reason, like I want something that's my own thing, leave the family farm, right? Which a lot of folks have different reasons for doing that. So, there was a personal developmental reason why I wanted to become a doctor. And then what gave it all the momentum was the excitement of learning about these type of topics. And it's still, more than ever is relevant today, the idea of, are we sicker than we used to be, and why?
Yeah.
And even more recently, it's not like, RFK Jr. is now head of, HHS, and, there's no going back. No, like they would happily, and when I say they, just the powers that be would happily, bury all discussion of environmental causes of diseases, right? And so I've got I like to boil things down into the most relatable terms. I almost feel like I'm like a esoteric health marketer, right? Like I'm not, I don't have a Substack. I'm not a researcher. And, what do? I make memes to get ideas out there. And one of the things I've been saying lately is, the only epidemics they're going to admit to are the ones they can blame on you.
Yes.
Right. Which is why when you have obesity, it's obesity due to excess calories. That's the
Yep.
ICD. That's the
Yep.
ICD code, right?
Yeah.
Well, sorry. Well, then why is everyone eating excess calories? Is everybody hungrier, right? And there's so many different ways we can go down.
What's funny too, what's funny about that and also interesting is the epidemics can be blamed on you. You are eating too much calories, but at the same time, it's not due to your agency. It's you're eating too many calories, and the only antidote is one. It's something external that you must purchase from the blob. So on the one hand, it's not an external thing that, it's not like you're consuming the wrong things are being put into your environment. It's not an environmental cause. Yeah. And yet it's also not your agency. There's this small sliver of stuff that can be given to you and purchased one way or the other. And that is the only option for fixing this.
Yeah. The most relatable thing I've heard from RFK Jr. is when he says that they just want everyone on an injectable. Like that it just, they don't want it to be like across the board. And I'm glad that he's trying to at least make this conversation official, right? And that's what brought me into medicine, was this conversation, right? And I know, when the rubber hits the road, and I met a lot of different patients of all different types, that a lot of people are going to need the injectable, right? Like they're just not going to. People talk about how they get, doctors say, I got sick of medical care and then I went and started my own concierge. It's like, well, that's great from a business perspective, right? But you have a captured audience. What I think is possible is I think you can change the food system in certain ways, which is why I think the seed oil topic is so relative. You could change it in ways that people wouldn't even notice, because seed oils don't even taste good, right? And so, if you went to a vegan wedding, it would be very obvious. If you went to even a gluten-free wedding, it would be obvious. If you went to a seed oil-free wedding reception, you wouldn't notice. If you went to all your favorite restaurants and they were seed oil-free, you wouldn't notice. And I think that I think it's for the Star Wars fans out there, I think it's the Phantom Menace. I think it's the thing that's out there in everything and slowly making us sicker. And that's the kind of underpinning of these discussions.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because this is a really good point of discussion, because when we talk about the modern food environment, we often talk about it, how it's hyper palatable. And this would be, I think what you're articulating right here would be a little bit different than if we were talking about, say, sugars or other sweeteners and things, because the taste component's different here. People often eat things because it tastes very good. And if you remove a thing that is bad for them, but it tastes very good, you're going to have to negotiate that trade-off somehow. But what you're saying is the seed oils don't even taste good. Is that what you're saying?
No, yeah. Well, you can. I've heard Tucker Goodrich talk about this. There's certain arguments with certain things that you can really get in the weeds in this topic. But in general, I don't think anyone's like, oh, this soybean oil really finishes this meal off well compared to like a butter, right?
Right.
If we're getting real about it, there is something interesting along the lines of certain additives that may be related taste wise. So for those in the weeds folks out there, I see you. But in general, I'm saying that, if you bought a cracker, right, that was made with soybean oil versus butter, I don't think that, there's not this like culinary edge that people have.
I've
Maybe
never
like some things like sesame oil or something. But
I've never heard a foodie type person say something like what you're pointing to.
Yeah.
I really like this one because it's got the soybean oil in it. They'll say it about other things.
Yeah. Although I don't think I've admitted this yet, that I heard the best pro seed oil propaganda the other day. I think it was we were at a restaurant that we stop at while traveling every once in a while. We just get something really basic like a burger or something, and we've been able to, we don't go there very often because we stop in West Virginia when we travel back to Maryland. And I noticed when we bring up the topic, the difference in the response from the waitress, and now she like is used to the question, right? And she said, "Oh, we use soybean oil. It's an Asian influence." and immediately I was like, "Oh shit, that's good. Yeah. Oh man, that's really good." I don't want to post about that, but you have to eventually. But I was like, man, that's actually pretty good. That's good. That's good propaganda for the other side.
Yeah. And I don't want to spend too much time on this because I've done content on it. There's a lot of content out on this stuff. So let's cover off on some basic stuff for people, because there is still a lot of confusion out there. A lot of people don't know vegetable oil, seed oil. Like, these terms can be very confusing to people. What are seed oils and what are not seed oils in your view?
Well, in general, what we're talking about, Dr. Kate Shanahan talks about the hateful eight. And every time I'm asked about this, I probably leave some out. But you've got corn and soybean and cottonseed and the basic what I like to describe is the hyper concentration of a marginally edible food. Right? There's a meme I drop all the time, which is like 5 grams of sunflower oil is 3,000 seeds, or 5 grams of corn oil is 100 ears of corn, right? So it's this. The reason why that's relevant is that it was impossible to eat that much before this industrial process in general.
The perspective I often come to with this stuff when I'm talking to people is, I was trained as an evolutionary biologist first. And so when you require human-made technology to concentrate something that much, that means by its very nature, it's going to have a composition that our senses did not evolve to deal with. And therefore, it can throw off our natural sensory systems in ways that, are unnatural, for lack of a better term. So there is an analogy you could draw with something like, say, cocaine. I don't know how many coca leaves it takes to make a gram of cocaine, but it's probably a lot. Great point. And when you concentrate things in that kind of unnatural manner through the use of industrial technologies, you're now potentially or likely going to be dealing with something that's going to interact with your sensory systems in a way that they're not sort of built to process. And that can literally throw things out of whack.
Yeah. Right before you were saying that, I was going to say evolutionarily novel. Yeah, because it was. I mean, even to jump ahead a little bit, we don't make omega-6 and omega-3.
Yes.
Right. So, and if you look at the food chain, they come from, in general, and this is Dr. Anthony Hulbert, who's great. He has this argument, which is very illustrative. In general, omega-3 coming from greens, right? And then through animals and then consumed by us, either directly with the greens. And then the omega-6 in general coming from seeds or grains, either directly or through animals into us.
Yes.
And then if you were to look at the seasonal availability of these things, they're probably, this would be a great rabbit hole to go down. You would be able to probably shine a light on this more than I would be able to. But there was probably a relative difference in intake through the year.
Yes.
When there's more greens available and less greens available.
Absolutely.
So I suspect that our natural flow of the circadian rhythms and the seasonal rhythms of our health and our cells is probably sensitive to even a slight up and down. I mean, that's a hypothesis, but I'm sure that it would be fruitful if we looked into that. I'm sure someone has, but my point is, I think that we're probably more sensitive than we even think, right? Because right now we're in if we're omega-6 overload, we're like in eternal winter, right? In a sense, we're in a light environment of an eternal summer and a cell environment of an eternal winter, which is probably the recipe for disaster.
Yes. I mean, everything is literally out of whack in probably the worst possible direction, right?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. Like, we're in eternal winter in one sense, but the light environment is telling us just the opposite. And so everything is literally out of sync.
And when we have these kind of conversations, I think that there's a lot of science-minded folks that are going to be like, okay, we're so many minutes into this. Why aren't you talking about human random controlled trials?
Right.
Because that's all that matters to those folks.
Yep.
I think that one point that we should, because the science-minded folks are going to be waiting for this.
Yes.
The important reason why we're having these conceptual discussions a lot is because the studies haven't been done that should be done, because you have to understand this from certain conceptual levels. Yes. For instance, it takes 8 years and so we already established that we're at these at least evolutionarily, these supra-physiological levels of omega-6 in our cells, right?
Right.
Everything from our membranes to our, mitochondria, right on down the line.
You're starting at a baseline that is unprecedented from a natural history perspective.
Oh yeah, evolutionarily novel, easy argument to make. Dr. Chris Kenobi really has done a great job of outlining this. I think he really looked into it and found out that the normal level was like 2% or something like that.
Yeah, 2 to 3% is probably, it would be rare to go above that probably in traditional populations.
Yeah. So if you're trying to, with human beings, show, okay, well, how does this affect heart disease or, disease XYZ? You would have to have a washout period.
Yes.
Like to do a proper test. And that takes about 8 years, at least in measuring an adipose, right?
Right.
And so these conceptual discussions are important because anytime you look at research, especially human outcome, you can go, well, is that even valid?
Mm-hmm.
Right? What are we just measuring butter versus margarine? Right? You could throw a study out immediately if you're not looking at the principles, right? So that's why it's important to talk about these things.
And I think we'll circle back to a lot of that stuff because I want to talk about RCTs and why certain things are not seen in that literature. And just to hint at the answer here, the nature of how RCTs are done prevents us from studying certain very large swaths of real biology because they happen on timescales that are too slow, or because we can't control or measure for certain things. But you're absolutely right. I think when you look at, I always like to ground this in sort of in nature or an evolutionary ecological perspective, because, you said before, look at where we find these polyunsaturated fatty acids in nature. The omega-6s are in things like seeds. That's why we're talking about seed oils. The omega-3s are in things like certain plants and then certain animals that eat those plants. We talk about the omega-3s found in seafood, for example. We can't make these things. The other thing I like to touch on here is look at how these things are packaged in the times and places where you find them in nature. Seeds. What are seeds? They're little shells that are built to protect what's inside of it from stuff that can, in this case, oxidize the omega-6s. When you look at, say, omega-3s, like why does a fish oil supplement or a fatty fish tissue always come with omega-3s plus vitamin E and antioxidants? Because these things need to be protected from oxidation because bad stuff is happening when they become oxidized, and bad stuff means it will break something in cells.
Yeah. And my role on the internet is to try to hammer what I, as a clinician, right? I'm face to face with a patient. I think of what could I put out there that if this person heard it in public would put them a leg ahead to start changing their lifestyle, right? Yeah. For instance, if you're diagnosed with celiac, well, congratulations, you live in like the best time to be diagnosed with celiac,
right?
Because of the legwork that the internet did, right? And I remember, you went from Rob Wolf and folks like that talking about celiac disease and gluten. It became a meme, and if it never was a meme, you wouldn't have seen it. If it wasn't like a lifestyle thing, you would not see the market. It would still be a very niche thing. Right.
Yeah.
It would be like,
you wouldn't have the cultural scaffolding to actually make your life navigable, if that's a word. And you could be dead right now, or you'd be very, very uncomfortable because no one is accommodating you.
Yeah, exactly. And, and so I looked at this seed oil topic, which I think I found, I remember when I tried to simplify paleo in my head years ago, that there's this one physician, I think he's what was his name? I'm sorry, but I'm forgetting right now. But he called it the 3 Neolithic agents of disease, which, and this was a blog that he had like 15 years ago. And it was grains, sugar, and industrial seed oils, right? And I remember thinking like, okay, there it is. That makes sense. Which is, of course, like what? The donut. The donut is green and sugar, and then fried in industrial seed oils, right?
Well, part of I was just going to say, part of, the last few years for me, when I started pointing my mind at food stuff, the natural way I thought about it was, again, given my evolution background and my behavior background, I said, okay, we all evolved from a common ancestor, but there's also a lot of diversity. A lot of different populations adapted to different environments. And despite that diversity, and despite all the different natural and food environments that exist, you see non-chronically diseased people in all these traditional populations, despite that diversity. So what's the common denominator? And one of the common denominators, despite wild differences in macronutrient composition, fat composition, and so forth, is the absolute levels of PUFAs and the omega-6, omega-3 ratio. That cuts across all of the traditional populations.
Yeah. Where are the healthy high omega-6 populations?
Yes.
Like we know where the healthy high saturated fat ones, we know where the healthy high fructose ones are. Mm-hmm. We know where the, that's a very good point.
And so you talk a little bit more about how you kind of got pointed at seed oil specifically, especially given what you do as a physician.
Well, so I did a business degree that I finished in my early 20s. I took my first chemistry class for pre-med at like 25 years old.
Yeah.
And then I didn't start med school till 31, right? Because I was working, right? Mm-hmm. This was not a casual thing.
But this was, in many ways, this was all curiosity driven.
Yeah, it was very much curiosity. It was, it was part just personal development. I want to be a doctor. I want to be I'm really bright right here. I'm going to turn this light down or something. The sun's going down a little bit, or at least it's about to rain. So now I'm like real bright. So that was the push was, personal development, and the pull was these topics that we're talking about right here. But the irony is that when I started medical school at 31, which was 2014, I put all the other stuff on hold. Like it was just so, the what's it called? Drinking water from a fire hose. It's absolutely true. And, for the folks out there, the first 2 years of medical school are like finals week.
Every week.
For 2 years straight.
Right.
That's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah.
You're just constantly feeling like you're studying for finals. It just becomes a normal thing. Like, what do? All I do is hang out and study with a little bit of breaks. And, I had a young autistic daughter, luckily, I'm married and had a very stable life. So that was actually nice and chill. What was the point we were hitting at here?
Well, just how you got pointed at the seed oil.
Yeah. So when I still a little bit here and there, bought a book or watched a YouTube video, but I wasn't really diving in.
So you had this curiosity-driven mindset. You were reading about the stuff, and then you went into med school, and then you're drinking from a fire hose. So you're kind of putting the curiosity stuff on hold. But now you're probably building this matrix of context that you can reinterpret.
And now I can, if someone says that, I'm going to name drop him a lot because he's, one of my favorite guys on this topic. But when Tucker Goodrich talks about diverticulosis and fibrosis and how fibrosis is related to lipid peroxidation, in my brain, I can look at soybean oil and a direct line to someone dying from a diverticulitis perforation and having to have a portion of their colon removed, right? I wouldn't have been able to do that until medical school, right? Yeah. There's a lot of smart folks out there that can do that without medical school. But for me, it was that entire experience. So diverticulosis being your colon, small little outpouchings that can happen. Those outpouchings can get infected and other things, right? So a very real world thing that I see at the end of the funnel as a hospitalist. And, but that understanding of, okay, what is fibrosis and what can happen in tissues and everything. So for me, I mean, that's something I can just do now off the top of my head. But for me, what brought me to the seed oil thing was, when COVID started, right? For me, I had the COVID residency. I was an intern in 2019, right? So it started my intern year. And by the end of my, in 22, in the end of my residency, because of a 3-year family medicine residency, by the end of that, we were out of lockdown, right? So our graduation was, we didn't have to wear masks, and it was great. So the whole thing was in there. When the first round came through, I was not afraid for myself. I was not afraid for my wife, for my daughter. We were relatively healthy people. Yep. We were never like paleo warriors, but we didn't eat like complete assholes, right? I've always wanted to be just like a run-of-the-mill healthy guy, right? I didn't want to be extreme about anything. But then when the Delta variant came around, I was like, okay, it's changing. Yeah. Right. And that's what freaked me out, because I was like, okay, I don't know what it's going to change into. Right. I started to see younger people get sick.
Delta was kind of like the one of the worst ones we saw.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, so for folks out there, so I've always kept like one foot in like the kind of esoteric world. I tried to, at least more so, because I became more active on the internet, I guess, at that time. Or at least the voices of dissent of the esoteric world became more prominent with the pressure of COVID, right? So I started paying
Yes.
more attention to it because of COVID, right? So even when COVID started, I remember thinking like, okay, where's the excess deaths? I wanted to be, I wasn't like, okay, CDC, tell me what to think. Like, I'm always like, okay, I want to keep an open mind because, it's important to do that. But what it was for me that summer is I realized that me as a 20 or was it I 38-year-old or whatever at the time, I was like, I've got high blood pressure. I was like, last time I remember checking that a couple of years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I was not. I check it at work and it was like 155. I'm like, oh shit, like that's real high blood pressure. I check it at home, I couldn't get it below like 140, right? And I was like, this is systolic, top number. And so I had to admit to myself, I was like, I'm doing something wrong, right? I know I'm a busy guy. I'm in my late 30s. I drive an hour to work, all the stress and everything. I was like, but I'm obviously not doing something right. I had a low body fat percentage, and I was like, okay. So I actively, because I knew how dangerous it is. For me, the way I think, if I get into it, I know I can go overboard, right? But I feel like I had to because, importantly, my answer was not like, okay, I guess I have to start lisinopril or amlodipine or losartan or hydrochlorothiazide, right? This isn't like, okay, here's your first line for your blood pressure medicine. Mine was like, no. I'm going to do primary care, which as a side note, no, not a lot of people do primary care, which is prevent the diseases. So, so when I went back in, I remember I still had all my former stuff that I read about with, the 3 Neolithic agents of disease is how I would summarize paleo. And when around that time, I remember I saw a lot of videos, honestly, I give him a lot of credit from Tucker Goodrich, really going into detail on these things. And that coupled with all that, physiology training and pathology training. And I had this aha moment, which I post all the time, which is it's the seed oils, is that I realized that where the rubber hits the road on so many problems is that end lipid peroxidation problem.
Yes.
Right? And that was such an aha moment. It almost overnight. And what's funny is that the first thing I did was go when we finally hit our surge at our hospital, right? Because when COVID started in March of 2020, we were not busy at our rural hospital in Eastern Kentucky. But in August of 21, the numbers went, just Delta is what hit us hard. And, our PACU, that's the area you come out of after you have surgery, was a makeshift ICU. You could walk in there and it'd be BiPAP, ventilator, just sick people lined up, right? And that's when I knew, like, okay, this is just unpredictable. I'm scared, right? On a certain level, just personally want to take it seriously. Again, that's why I went into this. So I had this aha moment where I realized that in general, I would say that for the average person, the 80-20 of nutrition is a low omega-6 diet. Because I know that there's a lot to this, right? Yes. Everyone's probably got different ways that they handle carbohydrates and way you sleep and your stress. And there's so many different reasons why you could develop heart disease. But where the rubber hits the road, I enough to bet my own life on it. I say that, for your average, grab your average American off the streets and say, if you want to get the most out of this, you would eat a low omega-6 diet, which nobody is doing unless you're consciously doing it, or since I'm a physician, I know you have a very strange OCD and only eat like celery or whatever.
Right.
I don't even know, what I mean, and which I've seen.
Let's unpack where the rubber meets the road for people in a minute. And what that really means. But, one thing I want to say here is, I think I'm sort of echoing a lot of what you're saying, but, as I was, on a similar time course, actually, not too dissimilar, I was doing my mind meld here, and I was like, okay, what are some of the common denominators that cut through all the human diversity that evolved? Some people some populations ate a lot of starch, some ate a lot of fish, some ate a lot of whale blubber, and so on and so forth. I realized, okay, well, everybody, so just to give one anchor point here, if you look at copy number variation, which means the number of genes essentially you have of amylase, and so this is basically your starch digestion enzyme, huge variation in human populations. like lots of variation because some populations ate a lot of starch and some didn't. And so there's pressure driving you in one direction or another. So now I could think, okay, well, that would make sense for why some people might have trouble with starch and some people might not. Yeah. So again, on this journey where I'm like, but what's the common denominator? I came to the omega-6s as well. And you mentioned, you use the phrase where the rubber meets the road. And I want to now unpack that for people. What exactly do you mean by that when we start talking about lipid peroxidation, oxidative stress, and the specific role of these fats in here?
Sure. So the reason why I'm saying rubber meets the road, so for the non-technical folks out there, you could talk about car design and engines and aerodynamics and everything. But if you put that car on an oil slick, it's not going to do anything. Right. Yeah. So the rubber meets the road as in like, where is the damage happening? Where is the disease progression happening? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And there are more studies out there about, you said it, oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation than you could ever read.
Yes.
Existing right now, links on PubMed, mm-hmm. You can't read them all. And importantly for the folks out there, because I know there's, we should all be skeptical, but there's a certain point where you just have to make a decision for your life, right? So I'm a skeptical on the degree. I'm a skeptic on, but I've made the decision for myself and what I would do and what I would recommend for somebody to be a low omega-6 mm-hmm. diet, right? Yeah. And I'm not waiting for the NIH to have the perfect RCT on it because I know they're not doing a good job of that, right? And so I'm trying to be really fair here, right?
Yeah, and as we'll come to the perfect, I'm not going to wait for that RCT either because I know that it's basically not going to get done.
Oh, good, way. Yeah, and I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, but before we get there, one thing that I want to point out that was sort of implicit in what you just said, and it's also one of my favorite memes that I've seen you do on a recurring basis, is you will often post, say, what will look like a complicated biochemical diagram to the untrained eye, and it'll say reactive oxygen species 4-HNE or whatever, and you point to it and you say, that means seed oils, because most people don't know that without training, but also the literature itself is often not saying seed oils or omega-6s, and yet it's right in there.
Yeah. So the diabetic drug, and dapagliflozin, I love that one because it shows the I'm not going to get too into it. When I speak about this topic, I almost feel like there's a doctor in the room and a patient, right? Mm. So I'm not your guy. Like, if you put me in a room with a bunch of pharmacists, I'd be like, you all probably know way more about like the dynamics than I do, right? Like I have to constantly live between these worlds of what's relatable to somebody. So when you're looking at a map and a diagram of how a drug works, you're constantly seeing lines that go towards, and this is where the damage happens. And we call it reactive oxygen species, right? And that's important, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're in a pathological state of diabetes and your blood sugar is so high that it's spilling into your nephrons and so that you pee it out. Yeah. And for folks at home, they used to diagnose diabetes by tasting pee. So the sugar's in, there's so much in your blood that it's spilling out, and the way this drug works to redirect that, well, that's causing more reactive oxygen species, which is, again, it's the omega-6. And remember, and since we started doing this with cottonseed oil in the late 1800s, and then right on through the boost of the soybean oil in the 1970s, your cells are now packed towards more of this than your ancestors were in 1840. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they just were not, they just didn't have it. It was not there.
And I used to actually take this a little bit further. I used to think of reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress as sort of like, this is where the damage is happening. And it is to some extent. Mm-hmm. But a lot of the damage comes from reactive oxygen species not causing the damage themselves, but actually inducing the production of some of the things we'll talk about from omega-6s. The actual toxins then go on to do the damage. One interesting fact I learned not so long ago is there are many assays out there where you induce oxidative stress, you see a boost in reactive oxygen species beyond the antioxidant capacities of the cells and tissues, which is where they become problematic. And then you get cell death. That's not interesting. That's not surprising. Of
Mm-hmm.
course you do. What's interesting is you can often block the cell death even though you retain the increase in reactive oxygen species by blocking what happens after the reactive oxygen species are formed. And what is that? That's the lipid peroxidation stuff. So another way of saying all that is
sure.
reactive oxygen species both cause direct cell damage themselves, which can cause cell dysregulation, which means something problematic is happening. But a huge chunk of the reactive oxygen species also go on to create other toxins through things like lipid peroxidation that then go on to actually damage the cell and cause cell death or dysregulation.
Yes. I've got this story that I need to work on it more. And hopefully I want to do a book. I had this great idea. That's a kind of a guide to this for anyone from, the patient to the doctor, to get people into this topic. I think there's need for this. Maybe you could help me.
Maybe, yeah.
But before I did one of my pre-med finals, this was a night class, I remember sitting in a high level engineering class. And it was like the day before, it was the class before their final. So their professor was going through a book and telling them all the topics that could be on it. And I remember how comical it was to listen to the guy talk about this coefficient and that. And I mean, I'm almost laughing because I'm like, I'm glad I'm not in this class, right? And what occurred to me is that, kind of like how we talked about the oil and where the rubber hits the road. Everything that guy was talking about, if you add rust to the equation, it would mess it up, right? Like you can bring up anything, right? Mm-hmm. So if for a lay person or even a physician that, if let's say you're a cardiologist and you think about, cardiac tissue and myocytes, and you think about, Purkinje fibers, and you think about, this is what you think about all the time. You don't think about nephrons, right? Well, it doesn't matter, right? Whatever can, the relative concentration of omega-6 in those cells and the propensity to create reactive oxygen species and 4-H&E and how it can damage proteins and membranes, and that's all happening in every single tissue, right? You don't need to be a specialist. You could right now use your imagination and go out into the literature and find something on it right now.
Right. What you're saying is the chemistry that produces the toxins isn't dependent on being in one organ or another. It's because it's based on the fats that are in the lipids of all cellular life.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what makes it so fascinating. There's so much information out there. I don't know, there's a lot to be said to this, because the folks that want to defend seed oils, sometimes I have a hard time understanding them, because it's like, they just think it's like almost like I have a hard time if something gets 500% worse, and I'm making up numbers here, and then you do an RCT that shows that it got 10% better, how could you be satisfied with it? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I can point to, the only thing that I see people say that's internally inconsistent, I don't agree with this as an argument in the end, but that's internally consistent, is they connect it with lower cholesterol is better, right? Because there's still so many people that believe lower cholesterol is always better. You always need to decrease LDL under all circumstances. That's like the number one thing. And eating PUFAs will probably lower your LDL to some extent. There's definitely data out there on that. Yeah. Beyond that, I don't understand what the actual argument, the substance of the argument is.
And I think that's where our earlier point is so important, is because if you're in a environment where the floor is too high, right, then you're not really getting good outcomes, right? Because our conceptual argument would be, if the floor is too high, well then yes, less cholesterol can be beneficial because it's less of the dangerous oxidized cholesterol, right?
Right.
But I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if a lot of folks don't care. I don't know. There's a business and a psychological component to this. Like there's some folks out there that just are not going to be comfortable with the what I would call the reality of beef and butter being healthy. Right? There's a lot of folks who go, no, I'm not going to go there. Right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of psychological discomfort that would come with throwing out the worldview they've constructed.
Sure. Yeah. And, you and I, it sounds like we're automatically on the same page that we're not getting hung up on starch.
Right.
And there's a lot of folks who they've got entire careers based off of saying, carbs are basically poison. If there's a little bit of dextrose in something, you're just killing yourself, right?
I think some
there's
people,
context to that, but you and I just immediately okay, like we both agree.
So I mean,
like we're not worried about it. Yeah.
So again, I think of all of this almost like a math problem. I was like, I'm interested in the common denominator. I think there's interesting things that are particular to different populations. I'm a population evolution guy. I find that to be interesting. Some people will have difficulty with starch because they don't have the digestive capacity that some other people have. But what is the common denominator that's clearly making everybody sick?
Yeah.
It can't be the starch in that case.
Yeah. So I would hope that there's enough curiosity out there. Now, I guess we need to make it clear why RCT, and I know this is what you said you wanted to get to, but I think that one of our most important goals right now for just the greater scientific community is what kind of human trials you would need.
Yes.
What would, like, you need to make it almost embarrassing to defend a bad trial.
Yeah.
Like it's limited, right? You know, it's not just butter versus margarine. No, like it's a low omega-6 diet versus at what, I mean, the idea would be that this is a threshold phenomenon.
Yes.
Right. Like, at what threshold, and with other elements being important, like relative omega-6, relative omega-3,
oxidative stress load,
choline, there's a lot of secondary factors out there that change the game too.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not a physician scientist by any means, but I know these exist.
But let's unpack some of the details here for people. When we talk about lipid, I'm just going to start and then you can I'll hand it off to you.
Nice.
Fats become incorporated into your membranes and in your fat tissue. They can be saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated, and so forth. When the polyunsaturated fatty acids are incorporated into your tissue, they are there, obviously. And if they encounter reactive oxygen species, those radicals will tend to react to them. And that's just sort of brute chemistry. That can and will happen at some point. Obviously, the more reactive oxygen species you generate, and there are many ways you can do that, the greater the chances that you will induce lipid peroxidation. When we say lipid peroxidation, we mean chemistry that takes that PUFA that wasn't necessarily causing you any issue before, and it's creating things that are highly reactive. What do I mean by reactive? I mean something that's going to break stuff in your cells, because that's what we mean by toxic, basically. And just to be crystal clear for people, when we say toxins, we are talking about things like 4-H&E, like acrolein, like MDA. These things are what you find in cigarette smoke. So another thing that confuses me about all of this is we know from the chemistry, basically, that these things can and will be produced to some degree or another as a function of the PUFA load in someone's cell membranes and the reactive oxygen species production they have, how much of it they have. I like to analogize this to a fire, right? If I want to start a fire, I need a fire starter like a lighter or a match or something. That's like your reactive oxygen species. I also need a lot of flammable material. My house right now, if I just put a lighter up to the wall, it probably won't ignite the whole house on fire. But if I start crinkling up newspaper and putting it all over the floor, now a lighter can ignite the whole house on fire. So all of these forces, need to be at the right levels for real damage to start. But at the end of the day, we're talking about chemistry where reactive oxygen species react with the PUFAs to create the same types of toxic molecules that everybody would otherwise agree are totally toxic.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy, because what you mentioned, 4-H&E and MDA and other things, when we say toxins, it doesn't mean that there should never be any of that ever. Yes. There's actually a evolutionarily consistent level that plays a part in normal cell death.
Yes. Right? Same for reactive oxygen species production.
Yep. It's complete, which is, I think that it's real. I remember, I think it was a neurologist, researcher neurologist, when we were talking about ketogenic diets. Like I started really kind of when, in a little bit of free time while I was shadowing, this is before medical school, I started bringing up like random biochemical things. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember he made a point to say, well, you can really talk about this kind of stuff all day, but it doesn't always play out in human beings. Right. And so that's the camps that you have out there is the rigid world of, okay, what do the trials show us?
Yep.
And that's it.
If it's not in a trial that's published in the New England Journal of Medicine, it can't possibly be real.
Yeah, it's just or it doesn't matter, right? And then there's the esoteric world of the internet, right? In general, just from what we experience. Like you go to the doctor and they're just going to tell you something plain, or you go on the internet, and it doesn't always mean that one's completely right or one's completely wrong. Right?
Yes.
So you can really speculate on a lot of different processes out there, right?
Yep.
The reason why I think it's so important to talk about the rubber hits the road part is that it's hard to downplay that, right? Like you could use the word insulin sensitive versus resistant, and there's like certain things you can do where something like transiently becomes more one or the other, but then what is exactly pathological insulin resistance? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Right. But it's hard to say, well, you kind of have fibrosis. Well, fibrosis is a big deal. Or you kind of have cell death, or you kind of have oxidation of cardiolipin.
Your dopamine neuron died.
Exactly. Exactly. You're getting Parkinson's disease, right? It's hard to downplay that. I think that, if you're in the middle of the Krebs cycle and this is going back and this is going, so talking about, reduction and oxidation, like you really can get lost in the weeds in that. A lot of times I'm reading and I'm like, I leave and I go, I don't know if I learned anything there. Right. But I think that while I might downplay that, it's not easy for me. And, I've staked so much on it personally and professionally. It's hard to downplay that where the rubber hits the road part, because it's happening. If you want to, you talked about the different memes. Use an example. I think it was a PhD or an MD or something recently was talking about, well, the healthiest people have the highest level of omega-6 in their blood. And it's like, if you were to measure the damage, that's what the omega-6 became. So you're now the implication there is like, as you eat more of it, you're healthier, right? Yeah. And I don't think that's very fair.
Well, I mean, to use the analogy I was using earlier, that would be like saying, that's like we're measuring some kind of endpoint that's like burning, like your house burning down.
Yes.
You're saying the people with the most kindling in their living room piled up are the healthiest. It's like, well, you haven't lit it on fire yet.
Yes. Yeah. And it's important to note too, you talked about the different expressions of amylase, the aldehyde dehydrogenase tissue specific. That's fascinating how different people can be.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
When people say things like diabetes is stage 3, Alzheimer's is stage 3 diabetes, right? Or type 3 diabetes.
Type 3, yeah.
Like I get the concept there, like where you've got the inflammation if you go far enough, right? And it seems I think that's helpful in a way, but I like to I think it's important to note and to pick that apart, that you have plenty of folks out there that show up with a heart attack with an A1C of 4 point something, right? You see now. There's huge correlations between all these things. We live in a world where what are most people now considered pre-diabetic now? We're pretty close to that in the US.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to talk about averages and things nowadays, right? But you can see all of these diseases in people without diabetes, right? Yeah. But it happens to be where, you either had a problem with your pancreatic beta cells, right, with production, because oxidized LDL can kill, cells, right, with the production or that end stage resistance, right? And it's just there's so much different so many differences in tissue that this is such a fascinating and nuanced concept. And I'm sure a lot of people think, just if they just randomly see one of my memes, even my good friend Tucker, didn't take me seriously. When he first saw, when I was first gaining popularity and posting memes, he wasn't like an early follower. We kind of had to like link through other people where he's like, oh, you're a doctor? Oh, like he almost thought I was like mocking the topic.
I don't remember exactly for myself, but I remember I don't actually follow people on Twitter. I have lists.
I saw that.
But anyways, you started showing up in my orbit, and at first I had some kind of quasi similar reaction. I didn't pay attention. And then at some point you posted something and I was like, wait a minute, I think this guy actually knows what he's talking about. And it was that type of thing. It's not just a joke. But I want to talk about randomized control trials, what they can tell us, what they do tell us, what they cannot tell us. For my part, I'm going to say, I'm not going to speak for you, but no matter what I might say in a minute that's critical or whatever, or disparaging in some cases, I'm not saying RCTs are bad. I love randomized control trials when they're done well. But just
Or
like
they ask the right questions, and we
yes,
have the proper context for the answers.
yes, and
Yeah.
and there's
Or
many,
at least the right relation.
yes,
Sorry, the relationship between the question and the data that we get.
yes,
What
yes,
did we ask, and how
yes,
useful is the
yes.
answer in that
And
context?
I'll start us off with a good example there. But just like any other type of study, you know, I used to be a bench scientist with a mechanistic guy, scare quotes. And there's good and bad ways to do any type of experiment. You have to know how the tools were used, if they were used correctly, if they were setting up the question in a way that was really testable, and if the results can really show you what we think they might show you. You have to know what your blind spots are. And there are always blind spots and limitations, as we will talk about. One of the things that really annoys me when I see some of the seed oil wars online is people will say, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, mechanistic person, you just told us all this fascinating stuff about prostaglandins and inflammation, but if we give people more seed oils, we don't see an increase in their inflammatory markers. Checkmate. And you're like, you look at the actual studies they refer to, and you're like, you looked at one serum marker of acute infection-induced inflammation and said that was it. Like, right, there's many different ways you can measure different things, and there's lots of studies where things that are measured because they could be measured, not because they were the appropriate thing to measure. When we're talking about tissue, PUFA-induced tissue inflammation, the types of things you need to do to measure that are not necessarily going to be the types of things that are most commonly measured in the literature on inflammation.
I'm glad you. So to dig into that a little bit, I don't think I've spent relatively little time talking about prostaglandins and these things, because it does seem that is a very tightly controlled back and forth, right? But those same folks don't want to talk about 4-H&E. I always bring that up. It's like you don't want to talk about that. You don't want to talk about where damage is coming from. Even the related issues, like, you know, we brought up LDL, but you know, iron being dangerous. Well, why is heme iron dangerous? Is it because of, you know, what is ferroptosis? Sorry, I always drop
ferroptosis. Yeah,
it's like apoptosis.
Yeah.
So pronouncing the second P, apoptosis. So ferroptosis, you need something for that, right? That's a seed oil process,
right?
to sound ridiculous but true, right? And this is just so endlessly fascinating to me. Sometimes just, again, it's just hard to believe that other folks aren't as fascinated with it. But, you know, it is kind of silly, and, you know, I've contributed in a way to it being silly, but I don't know. I think I've done more help than harm. So,
well, yeah, I mean, some of your memes are really good, because it's like, you know, when you have that one that I mentioned earlier, where you're pointing to the 4-H&E reactive oxygen species part of the diagram, you're like, that means seed oils. I personally don't know of any other way you get 4-H&E, which is toxic any way you cut it, than from lipid peroxidation, which depends on polyunsaturated fatty acids. Maybe there's something out there where you can get 4-H&E another way, but I am not aware of it, and I've looked.
So for the technical folks listening, I recommend you get The Omega Balance, written by Dr. Anthony Hulbert, Hulbert. I think he's technically a zoologist, so he worked with animals. He lives in, I think, Tasmania. Great Australian guy. Well, his book talks about how all the different tissues in our body, right? If you're just looking at membranes, for instance, there's a relative percentage of PUFA that's necessary for fluidity, right? There's like the fluid. It's the fluid mosaic model of the bilipid membrane, right? And so let's say you just pick tissue X, whatever. It's going to be 10%, right? So no matter what, it's going to be made up numbers. It's going to be 10% PUFA. Well, that 10% is going of omega-6 to omega-3 is going to directly relate to what you eat. So if you used to eat, and that's that ratio, right? The omega ratio. If you used to eat, you know, a 3-to-1 omega-6 to 3 ratio, that's what that 10% was.
Yes.
And your body evolutionarily developed systems of dealing with that. Now that, you know, whether, you know, if it randomly hurt a protein every once in a while, well, you had ways of cleaning that up. If it randomly, you know, cardiolipin in your mitochondria got, you know, there's
some tolerable rate at which those things can be broken and fixed.
And this is why that ratio thing's so important, is that now that 10% of that, membrane is now 9.7% or 9.5% omega-6 and 0.5 omega-3, right? So, but the answer is not, and this is why I'm really careful about this. I could have grifted the hell out of my account by selling omega-3s and selling vitamin E's, but I didn't want that. I know there's only so much mental real estate on this topic, which is why in 10 years, if the only thing you remember is me talking about seed oils and sunburn, good, because that's the thing that's going to be most relatable to you and the rest of your family, right? That's going to hook. If comedians, Tim Dillon and Joe Rogan, if people start making jokes about seed oils and sunburn, I won. That's it. Like everything I've ever posted, I won. If that becomes a joke, right? Because of the whole, what we talked about earlier. If you're celiac disease and you want to go gluten-free, well, because it was a meme at some point, that's why it's in the grocery store, right? That's how it went. Sorry, I'm going to be all over the place here. I'm bad at that when I get excited. Where was I? Can you redirect me what I was just talking about?
So you were talking about how, right, to bring it back to the biology here, something like 10% of our membranes need to be PUFAs of some kind to maintain their fluidity.
Yes. So that's an automatic, the cell would not exist. It couldn't exist if it didn't have the certain amount of PUFA in the membrane, right? There's that fluid model, right?
Yep.
And that's different everywhere. Your brain's different than your heart, it's different than your kidney. And so for the technical and non-technical folks listening, that now is skewed. And that's an important way to remember that. So while your body was used to it throwing sparks, which was part of the normal cell process, now I've got a great post that I made. I'll send it to you. You could post it with this or something. It was, I got to find the study, but it showed these different boxes, right? And it was like a little bit of 4-H&E is normal. And then as it grows, and it gets to the point where if there's way too much and it can't handle it, well, you start to have cell death. Right. And that's why you see, they have, here's a great example. You have diabetic kidney disease. Okay. What is diabetic kidney disease? Well, that's when you have diabetes and you slowly get chronic kidney disease and your creatinine starts going up and your GFR starts going down and it just keeps getting worse. Well, if you don't control your sugar, it's going to keep getting worse. Well, that drug we talked about earlier, which helps divert sugar, right? That's being processed differently and generating ROS, that damage that is bringing you from normal kidneys to dialysis and killing you is 4-H&E.
Yes.
Right. And whatever the number is, I can look it up, but there's a certain relative percent of PUFA in those cells in your nephrons, in your kidneys, right? That we know now because of your diet is radically tilted towards the toxin production. Right. Yeah. And in this, there's a lot to be said about, and I don't know enough off the top of my head to make the scientific argument, but I think that omega-6s were required to even create the environment to create that hyperglycemia that's spilled into your kidney. So it's like you've got tissues here causing a problem, causing glucose dysregulation that's causing a problem over there. I think they're both on a mechanistic level related, but they're separate pathologies here, which is important to note. And this is just so endlessly fascinating.
Yeah, what you're saying is to the extent that's true, you can kill multiple birds with one stone by taking down your omega-6 intake.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. Over a long period of time. Too.
Right. And let's talk about that now.
Yeah. So, and what's interesting about at least clinically, I don't remember the names of the trials off the top of my head, but I know we've got good human data on migraines because that's something that's easier to test. If you do compare butter to soybean oil or something that, if you look at half-life, I don't know which way I'm going here, but, in that first half-life, you're going to go down 50%. Apparently that threshold with you start to see the improvements in pain by reducing your omega-6. So it's going to start to if you go from a seed oil high omega-6 diet to none, right, and you're just getting omega-6 from whole foods, right, you're going to plummet your levels of omega-6. Your body's going to start metabolizing them. Interestingly, when that does happen, if it happens in a drastic way, you may be producing a lot of those harmful compounds. Like you're getting rid of it, so you can. So I remember when this is completely anecdotal, but I have a history of ocular migraines and they were very painful. I got my first one when I was like 13 or something. Very classic story. As I ate less crap, they got better, right? And then so some folks out there will be like, oh yeah, you ate better. It's like, okay, well, explain that, right? Like where's the mechanism there of I ate better, my migraines got better. Now they're barely or at all painful at all. And what's the difference? The difference is, I would say, the amount of seed oils I'm eating. Now, as I was approaching, in my early 20s, like every day for lunch, I would want to eat something like Wendy's. By the time I was 31, I ate it sometimes, right? But not a lot, right? And I was an older person. I just wasn't eating like an idiot all the time. Now, by the time I'm 41 and a seed oil disrespecter, I don't do that at all, right? It's maybe a few times a year I'm at a restaurant for a special occasion and I go, look, I'm not going to interrogate the waiter about what they might squirt, a little bit of something, right? Like that's only a few times a year where I would even do that, but I'm not eating fried chicken, right? God, I keep doing this. I get on these tangents, and
one of the things things I think is interesting in what you just said that might be worth mentioning a little bit more on is, let's imagine you're a typical person out there. You've got some excess body fat to some degree. You have been eating what we call the standard American diet or whatever. And so you've been consuming a lot of seed oils. So that means you've got adipose tissue, you've got cell membranes. They've got a lot of omega-6s in them. And you decide
you're carrying it around with you.
Yeah. And you decide overnight, you know what? I seed oil disrespecter. I'm on board. I believe you. I'm going to cut them all out tomorrow. And you do that. One of the things you said was, if you do that and you start burning that body fat, as you're getting rid of those omega-6s, you might actually increase your your toxin load for something.
There's a bump before a reduction. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm sorry. The point I was going to make was the weirdest migraines I ever got were in that first 6 months of quitting seed oils completely. I had some really strange paresthesias. And since then it's like, I still get like an ocular migraine once in a while. Like the other day I was mowing the lawn. It hasn't actually happened in months. So they're less frequent. They're not painful at all. Maybe like the slightest little I'll just take a little bit of Tylenol, a little nagging headache, but nothing like it used to be.
What do you feel when it doesn't hurt?
So, and a lot of folks can relate with this. I get the ocular migraine. So just out of the blue, little flashing thing. And that lasts about, I think the neurologists say that's the vasoconstriction, and then the pain is the vasodilation. So I guess mine's kind of that, occipital region. And so, I'll get some flashing lights for about 20, 30 minutes. It used to be, there was like a lull for 10 minutes and then
pain.
Oh God. It used to be, and again, this is my nice anecdotal story that millions of people can relate with. I would want to take pain medicine and lay on the floor of the bathroom on the cold floor with the shower running and just, distract myself, just completely painful. Now I have no pain. After I had mine the other day while mowing the grass, it was probably just that vascular thing. It's hot out. I got a new shirt on, just kind of like different change of things that just triggered it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
After the blurry vision went away, I don't remember. I felt like maybe a slight nausea, but no, I just felt fine the rest of the day, just like a normal day.
Yeah.
So all the people out there with debilitating headaches, I virtually cured mine by quitting seed oils. Now, is it, I don't know. I would have to ask a neurologist. Is it a normal idea of saying that someone with debilitating headaches all through their teens and 20s, one day they would just go away? I don't know. I don't know if that's considered a normal thing. Oh no, sometimes they just go away.
Yeah. I want to talk about
my blood pressure is better too, by the way.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, and we know that I've done a number of podcasts that at least indirectly relate to this, but we know that the omega-6s, there's things like thromboxanes and things that control how blood aggregates and blood vessel constriction and all that stuff. And so, there's a pretty direct connection you can make from dietary PUFAs to these types of vascular issues.
Yeah. NO production. Again, I'm not a really great top of the head guy. If I had to really make a presentation, I would have to make a PowerPoint, but, I remember going into about the mechanism of Cialis, including that's, NO production and everything and all that. But, the PDE5 inhibitor, that includes there's an omega-6 story there. It's unavoidable. It's almost comical.
I want to talk, get your perspective a little bit more on, the limits of randomized control trials and why we see or don't see certain patterns in them. As one little starting point here, I've talked before with people about how if you change, say, the fatty acid diet composition of a rodent, and where you can do, say, 16 weeks of a diet study in a rodent, which would, work out to years of time in a human if you do the math, you'll see differences in, say, how fat the mice get over time. But what's interesting, and the higher seed oil diet makes them fatter, but you don't see that right away, right? It takes 12, 14, 16 weeks or something before you start to see a difference between, the high PUFA versus the high saturated fat groups. Is that
like a threshold phenomenon then? Like it hits a certain
No, it's just a slow crawl. And you don't get significance until some time has passed. And the point I'm trying to make is, to echo something that Tim Yateman, a scientist from the University of South Florida, I talked to him on the podcast about a study he did relating lipids to inflammation and colon cancer. And he said, a lot of this lipid biology happens at what he called a glacial pace. So, it's going to take time for some of this stuff to happen. And many of the randomized control trials that either have been done or could be done, where they're manipulating dietary PUFA intake, they often simply just don't last long enough for you to see some of the biology that can happen here. And so people will say, the result was negative.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And so we need to hammer that it's the principles that matter, and what the key principles are, being how important the time course is. Are you going to be fair and start at a washout, right? No one's going to do that. No, I don't think anyone's ever going to do a washout. No. That'd be nice. My joke, which is probably true, is that they wouldn't be able to do it because if you truly did a washout, the people would be so healthy. I don't know. Just, yeah.
So, let's talk about the sunburn issue. So I'm going to pretend like I'm an innocent bystander and who's happened upon this corner of the internet. And I see what looks to be like a set of absurd claims. I'm going to see people out there saying, apparently, that if you eat way fewer seed oils, you can avoid getting sunburned, or at least get sunburned less. There's people out there saying that other people are saying that you won't get sunburned at all if you avoid seed oils. What are people saying and what are they not saying? And what are you seeing on the ground as a physician with regard to sunburning and seed oil consumption?
I think this plays into a lot of the points that we hit so far. So I'm glad that we're doing this right now. I remember people talking about either not sunburning at all or drastically less during the paleo years, right? So they did a paleo diet and they go, wow, when I play golf or go swimming or whatever, out on the boat, I found that I don't even need sunblock anymore.
And real quick for people, just so they know what you're saying, remind them what paleo means specifically for you.
Oh, sure. I forget. It's been years now. It's like a generation ago. The paleo diet was the idea of like, eat like the cavemen, right? But really that's like a whole food diet, right? You could define it different ways. But the idea was like, not eat processed foods, like meats and vegetables and fruits and stuff, right? So it was just like a whole food diet. And I remember, but that was before medical school for me. I didn't have any kind of mechanistic perspective on anything. And just in general, I remember thinking like, whatever the vague cloud idea of inflammation. Okay, well, whatever that means, right? That's down. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, I told you my paleo concept got simplified more to the 3 Neolithic agents of disease, being grains, sugar, and industrial seed oils. So the big aha moment for me, literally the topic that convinced me to make my meme account, was the sunburn issue, because I had an aha moment where I realized that. And again, I'm going to, my number one guy, Tucker Goodrich, he talked about this. And that was my aha moment, which was that quitting seed oil, so a low omega-6 diet, resulted in a great resistance to sunburn. Mm-hmm. Now, if you go to the doctor today and you've got a really gnarly tick bite, oh man, it's all red and it's been irritated, and they go, you probably should have some doxycycline because, it's you do your like not prophylactic dose, but you just do your like 1 day dose or something. and we're going to give you doxycycline, or not even that. Let's say they give it to you for a week for something. Okay, you got an infection or whatever. They're going to go, okay, while you're on doxycycline, which is a tetracycline, you're going to have increased dermal photosensitivity. So I know it's June, so don't go and lay out in the sun this week, right? And there's a whole long list of things that can increase your dermal photosensitivity, right? One of them being tetracyclines. And if you look up the proposed mechanism, they say, it might involve singlet oxygen, right? So it's kind of oxygenation phenomenon. That's not controversial at all, like just not at all. That you can sunburn, you will burn more. It'll peel. It'll be painful.
You can ingest a type of molecule that will make you more sensitive to sunburn.
Oh yeah, that's not controversial at all, right?
Okay.
The argument is that omega-6 itself, a high omega-6 diet itself, which your skin is more sensitive to what you eat, right? Cell turnover and change is more sensitive in the skin. You're on chemotherapy and you lose your hair, right? Yep. Before your kidneys die or something like that, you're going to lose your hair. That change over there. So to simplify that more towards the layman, quit seed oils and you don't sunburn. Now, this is where the humor comes into play.
Yep.
If you go out for 2 hours and you don't burn at all, right? Like I make sure I tweet this all the time. I say the sun wins eventually.
Yes. So you're not saying you can go out for arbitrary amounts of time in the sun.
Yeah, that's stupid. Yeah, right, exactly. I apologize to anyone out there that thought that like I'm insisting that sunburn didn't exist. Like right. You're being ridiculous, not me, actually.
Yeah.
It's funny how I don't know if I posted this, but I was thinking about this the other day. You'll have someone with a bunch of followers, right, who's obviously an intelligent person who will counter signal the sunburn issue, right? They have less, and they're doing it for various reasons, right? Maybe it's, maybe they make money off of Wegovy or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, that's probably real. But the follower that has like, their last post was 3 years ago and it was about baseball and they have like 14 people that follow them. They'll DM me and it's like they're in my head. Yeah. Like immediately they're like, oh yeah, I started seeing your memes 3 years ago and I quit seed oils and I noticed an improvement and then I got better. It's like they're not asking me like, did you mean never? Like they immediately like get that like right. A superlative or an absolute is a way you're humorous about something that's a lot, right?
Right.
So yes, it's the technical term is, I would say, a high omega-6 diet increases dermal photosensitivity, right?
Yeah.
But the fun line is seed oils cause sunburn, right? But for some people, it's like it is true because it obviously, like we talked about, everyone's different, right? You're going to have different. I'm sure even just the whether it's aldehyde dehydrogenase or whatever kind of mediating factors are at play. You're going to have different genetics and tissue expression and everything. Some folks are like, look, I am adamant. I don't even eat chicken and pork, right? We didn't even hit on that issue, but I eat a low omega-6 diet and I still burn. And I'm like, okay. I get other people who are like, I am a blue-eyed or whatever. No, I'm a green-eyed ginger with a last name of a leprechaun, and I don't sunburn in Florida anymore.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And I'm actually really glad that I started talking about this in 21 before, everyone talks about bots when AI takes over. Cause I think at a certain point, no one's going to believe any trend, but it just keeps happening. Right. And we don't need an NIH study. This is something you could do now. You can experiment within a few months and probably see some improvements.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer for you. I don't know how long you have to do it. All I know is to an extent it's work with me. I went to the Alabama, a month ago or something. And I didn't wear sunblock the whole week.
Yep. And I can tell people, here's my own little anecdote to throw in.
Yeah.
I was never like sun phobic like before, really. So it wasn't like I was, neurotic about sunscreen, but I would say last summer I was still using, mineral sunscreen as opposed to chemical sunscreen, as they sometimes say. And that had been true, I don't know, for at least a couple of years. So I wasn't dousing myself in chemical sunscreen for some time. I wasn't like totally and utterly avoiding the sun at all. But this year is the first year where I'm not using any sunscreen at all. And I think I'm a Fitzpatrick 2. So I'm very pale, not, Northern Ireland ginger pale, but I rarely tan much and I easily burn and have my whole life. I've been outside for the last few days. Yesterday I was walking. Last 2 days I was walking for a lot outside. I was doing stuff outside, running errands and having some fun. I was outside with no sunscreen for multiple hours each day, not continuously. I was intermittently going in and out of the shade, but I was spending extended periods in the sun. I am visibly more colored, more than I was a week ago, because summer is just kicking off here in the Pacific Northwest, and I don't have any sunburn at all. Yeah. Is that because of the seed oil thing? You decide, but I can tell you that for most of my life, that amount of sun exposure at this part of the summer already, and I would have some sunburn, and I don't.
Yeah. And so it just keeps happening. Like I'm so happy that this phenomenon exists, because the time scale, it's something personal. It's something really not medical, right? You could put this on the cover of Cosmo. They're not going to, but you could, right? And maybe it will. Maybe it'll accidentally get released somewhere where people are like, oh yeah, like, I don't like, Tom Brady talks about how he doesn't sunburn. People are like, oh, it's because he drinks a lot of water. It's like, okay, well, go to the beach, drink a ton of water and do your experiment, right? And there's, I think that, mechanism plus result is a real understanding of something, right? Like, people joke about do we need RCTs for, parachutes, right? Like, no, because you can understand the mechanism and the result, right?
Right. And, that's good. Yeah.
But this is it. I'm excited it's there, because I know if you just go out there and hammer diabetes, cancer, like you're only going to get so much. But if like I said, if I can, once the comedians joke about, oh, I got a sunburn the other day, if I can get there, I won.
Yeah. And what I love about it too is it's like like a low risk phenomenon in a sense. It's like, we're not saying experiment with something that might cause or not cause cancer, or like the stakes aren't that high.
Like everyone knows 3 grams of aspirin a day or something.
Right. Yeah. Everyone knows, how much sun exposure they normally tolerate, for a whole lifetime of experience. And if you alter this part of your diet for some time, I don't know, months, a year or two, that's all, that's pretty low hanging fruit in terms of how you can then do the experiment yourself.
Yeah. And I know other people have brought this up, but I feel like I'm the guy that hammered it.
Yeah.
I feel like, not to get credit, but it's exciting to be like, I'm glad I really put that out there, really hammered it. So,
yeah. And, again, just to sort of regurgitate some of the things we've been talking about, like, no, if this was divorced from what has weirdly maybe become like a cultural or even political issue, the seed oil question, if we were just talking about oxidative stress and acrolein and 4-HNE and stuff like this, like everyone would be on the same page. Like, yeah, you don't want an excess of these things because they're toxic, because they're going to cause damage to components of your cells. They're going to prevent them from working properly. And yet, when it comes to this issue, I don't know, people seem to just get confused and lose track of, what's the actual, where does the rubber meet the road? We're talking about the production of toxic compounds. That in any other context, you'd be saying, oh yeah, of course cigarette smoke's bad.
Yeah. I mean, if you get into pathology, it's, almost everything. The better question is, okay, what is completely not related to seed oils?
Right. Yeah.
Like, oh, this is an interesting thing here. Okay. Yeah. You could, because I'm sure that even, I'm just guessing, but I bet, I'm going to throw it out there, a high omega-6 diet probably doesn't help cystic fibrosis. I don't know. Maybe I'm completely wrong, right? Something that's very definitively genetic or something, but, maybe the actual disease expression changes too. I don't know. There's so many layers to this if you want to be nuanced and look into the pathology. So, yeah.
In fact, I mean, that's an interesting idea. Something that's clearly genetic, take something like ALS, where it's like, one of the few examples of a 1G mutation. But at the same time, what we're talking about is cells dying. So I wonder if the time course of that would even be modulated by something that's going to be connected to oxidative stress levels.
Well, I mean, ARDS is omega-6, the acute respiratory distress syndrome with COVID, cytokine storm. That's an omega-6 phenomenon.
Explain that for people.
I'm not going to do a good job of that. I'm going to do a disservice. I didn't do my homework. I was at jujitsu before this, not putting a PowerPoint together.
Yeah.
But it's a similar concept when you have an excess of something, especially when you like the burning fat. Yeah. If you're really sick and you're almost kind of like losing weight in the hospital, in a sense, right? I mean, you literally are a lot of times when you're like, deathly ill. I remember seeing overweight. You would see that overweight in severe COVID, who were like on a lot of oxygen for weeks. They were losing body fat.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. Tucker has covered that really well. He has a good story he tells that kind of mechanistically makes a lot of sense. But talking about cytotoxins and ARDS, I think that's brilliant. I'm gonna do it such an injustice that the technical people would laugh at me. I can't do that top of my head.
One thing I want to talk to you about, because of your background and because of this meme account that you have that's been so successful in the social media sphere. So I'm really interested in cultural evolution, how just as I'm interested in biology and how organisms change over time and what makes that work the way it does. I'm also very interested in cultural evolution and how ideas change and morph over time. And, this is going to be informal. I just want sort of just your basic take on this as a human being, given the meme account that you have. For reasons that, I think I have a partial answer in my own head about, but I keep wondering about a lot of issues that aren't in themselves political or tied to culture war stuff. We're talking about omega-6 fatty acids and biochemistry and biology and nutrition. In theory, none of this stuff should be political or fodder for the culture war. And yet diet clearly quickly becomes very political, right? Like if I said to you, is veganism left-wing or right-wing? There's clearly an answer to that. The seed oil issue has also become politically coded in certain ways. How do you see that coding playing out, and where do you think this comes from? Why do certain sort of diet trends tend to become coded politically in one way or the other? Do you have a sense for that, given what you do?
Well, when paleo, like we talked about earlier, was popular, I remember when cricket protein bars came out. I remember it was called Exo bars.
Protein bars made from crickets.
Made from crickets, right? And I'm not related. I'm not making any money off this to bring them up. Or actually, I don't even know if the company's still around. And I didn't know anybody. I wasn't a big name or anything in the paleo world. I just talked to people on, Instagram Messenger and like blog comments and stuff, right? If I talked to any of the famous people back then. But that wasn't considered, new world order. It's eat the bugs, right?
Right.
People were like, here's a good source of protein, right? So if you were at I forget what year it was, but if you were at a CrossFit gym in 2010 eating a cricket bar, people weren't like, what the fuck's up with this guy, right?
Yeah. You're a Klaus Schwab acolyte.
Yeah. And honestly, I didn't really have my finger on the pulse of that change. I think I kind of, even like almost like after I made my account, realized who I was, right? Like, or where I was exactly. Because plenty of people can, not everyone is 100% like some people that make accounts are almost like a archetype. Like even if they are different, they're going to be anonymous and they're just going to be an archetype. I never had that intention, right? I was always just like the first podcast that I went on as Seed Oil Disrespecter. I don't even think I had my name. Was definitely a right-wing thing. And he asked me, like, are you vaccinated? I was like, yeah, I did in residency, right? Like I wasn't like trying to pretend like I'm like this right-wing schizo archetype, right? I was just like, it's more interesting who I am, right? That I started this account residency and everything. But there's a simple way to look at it, which is like, the Harvard School of Public Health says seed oils are healthy. And it's a vegan thing, and seed oils are vegan, right? So it's easy to just kind of make it fun of that. But you're right. There is this interesting trend over time, like the Maha moms. We have an autistic daughter who's nonverbal. She's a teenager, and she has a couple genetic issues. She has a mitochondrial issue, and we just went and she got that diagnosed because we were in Maryland, so we were up in like the Johns Hopkins area. It's called Kennedy Krieger, where she had that genetic testing done when she was like 2.5 or over 2. And then we went back last year, now that we're in Kentucky at UK, and they looked at the same results and they found something else that can be related to neuron development. So she clearly, I joke that we know what her puzzle piece is. It's like, okay, she probably has some sort of genetic learning disorder with this. So it's not like this big mystery, right? But there is this, I didn't quite grasp. And I think that these, we used to always say the term polarization has been used a lot since social media. It's this drastic phenomenon where people are siloed because the algorithms just bring people to do two different silos. I didn't quite until the media, the terrorist media, went after RFK Jr. on something he said about, debilitating autism, right? Their whole point to put him down is because they just want to discredit him completely. And he was talking about all the families out there. I forget what the percent was, 25% or whatever it was, of autism that's severe, right? People that are in diapers and things like that. I didn't quite appreciate how many people out there that are like, there's no epidemic, right? Like we said at the beginning, the only epidemics are the ones that we can blame on you. Like, no, there is no change. It's just, they're the only reason why. And again, the skeptic in me is like, I need to be open that could be a possibility, but it just doesn't seem like it, right? But sometimes you can be completely wrong. And so I almost feel like, I feel like in this case, I feel like the burden's on if you really think there is no epidemic, you better explain that really well, right? It's like if you think that a high omega-6 level is not responsible for a high amount of damage from omega-6, then you need to be able to explain that really well, right? The burden, is, I know that's a weird, scientific concept, but
yeah. I mean, part of the problem there is, they don't recognize that the burden's on them because they don't even know, you said that a high omega-6 diet is causing problems caused by what comes from a high omega-6 diet. They don't have that middle piece. They don't have that.
You're right. That would be so bizarre for some folks, right? But my point here is that there's this silo of everything is making us sicker and they're not admitting it. And then there's the silo of no, there isn't at all, right? And it's worse than I even realized. Right? And like, for instance, my knee-jerk reaction is I don't think that and people are going to hate me, right? I don't think the regular vaccine schedule is as devastatingly deadly as a lot of people on the esoteric side is. But at the same time, from some of the stuff that I've read, it might be way sillier in some ways than the NIH side would say, right? Like, where were the mortality curves and when was it started and how necessary is XYZ? I think that it could be quite, I think there's enough there that could be, and I don't want to be like the Captain Midwit, but I think there's enough there that could be embarrassing for a lot of people on what other side you're on. Like if they did certain studies, maybe they'd find out like, oh, maybe we don't have to do that. Oh, really? I think or what if they did certain studies and they're like, look, that's completely not related to autism at all. XYZ it's not related to certain kinds. But I think the greater point here is that in a way you could say there's like no such thing as public health, right? Because you've got everybody, but there's obviously like different types of people and different, you see what I'm saying? Like if you just say like, oh, is this beneficial for everybody? Like, it's okay. Well, we're talking about human trials here, right? Like you have to ask the right question and then your answer in the right context. But
I mean, when I look at things and I sort of cut through the noise and my brain does, kind of like a principal components analysis. And I'm like, what's the axis of variation here? I basically, so if I use a term like the system or the blob or I mean like the Harvard School of Public Education, right? That's like the official institution of knowledge for this stuff. And basically, if something's in line with that, you're going to be in one silo. And if something is misaligned with that, you go into the other silo. Yeah. So,
and then people are also virtue signaling on both sides really hard, which is fun and it can be funny. And I'm sure I've made plenty of posts that are similar in a comedic sense. Like, oh, I'm just going to do everything opposite. Right. Because we live in such a crazy time, people are just leaning in really hard to being like an archetype of a side. But overall to answer the question very plainly, you just have more people are just going to either fall in line or try to be completely different because of those reasons. And, again, I don't want to be Captain Midwit, but I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I'm very skeptical just in other ways too. Like I probably said this earlier, like primary care doctors don't do primary care. They do secondary care.
Yeah.
Right? Because, people don't even take the pill that you give them for their blood pressure. 60% or whatever actually takes the medicine on, all the time. And the general public, if you're just going to sit there and talk about diet, one of the first questions you asked me about learning about diet, that's not going to fix everything, but you have to officially be able to ask the right questions in order to have good policy, right?
Yeah.
Everyone loves the P word, right? But if I would predict that if we had the right studies done, it would be overwhelmingly obvious that a low omega-6 diet would be the way to go. And if we had that out there, then it would be an actual public health. You could have certain limits, right? Like, you can't fry food if you're going to produce a certain amount of acrolein and everything else, because we know that's dangerous. And then before you know it, they'd be like, it's illegal to fry things and sell to the public. You have to be careful about this, right? If you're going to have, over a certain amount. But then again, should you be free to fry something in olive oil if you want to? That might be 22% or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's hard to say. I know enough people just networking, doing what I do here, where I'm not too many degrees of separation away from policymakers right now.
Yeah.
So I've had conversations with people like, what would you want them to do in theory, mm-hmm. right? Where they just get ideas. And that's a hard question to answer, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not, mixed seed oil is illegal. It's like, no, I know, because real political victories are ones that are no longer partisan, right? Like,
yes,
which
it
is why
becomes a part of the culture that everyone just sort of takes for granted.
Yeah, you want to think past the sale. So that's why you want to, always try to sell something like it's already been sold or something, or it's already been bought. And so I don't have an easy answer for that. Like, but just being honest about some of that damage out there could be really helpful. It was a tough conversation because you just don't know what to say,
mm-hmm.
It's not as easy as the jokes, right? The joke, you can do comedy on this all day, but then you go, okay, Mr. Smarty Pants, like, what would you do? And I'd be like, well, maybe, be honest about where this damage is coming from. And, if you, I don't think we mentioned this yet, but the endless studies out there, because you said when I do the memes and I point and say this is seed oils,
right?
The endless studies out there won't even mention omega-6 or linoleic acid, the term for the nomenclature for omega-6 fats. So if you're a curious scientist that might not know too much about this topic, and you just whip open the internet and you start looking around for vegetable oil or soybean oil, you're going to get such an incomplete picture.
Thousands of studies will be invisible to you.
Completely invisible. Yeah. Because of the stuff out there that don't even mention that. And that's because we talk about reactive oxygen species. The gold standard for measuring oxidative stress is 4-HNE. Like we measure the 4-HNE.
Yep, and 4-HNE. I don't know if we fully said it before. This is a reactive aldehyde. It's produced when an oxygen radical basically touches a PUFA. It produces this thing that's highly reactive, which means it will then go touch something in your cell, like a protein or DNA or whatever, and break.
Stopped. Yeah.
It's amazing how. I like when you said rubber meets the road earlier, because when I get into a lot of discussions that have to do with this stuff directly or indirectly, even when you talk to educated people, the problem I'm about to speak about is I almost see it the most when people are what I'll call partially educated. They're like in the middle. They have some education in this stuff, but they haven't really gone down to the deeper layers yet. They'll talk about, this or that food component causing damage, but then you ask, okay, what is causing the damage?
Yeah.
And they often don't have an answer for this, and this is why, so much comes back to the omega-6s for me, as I'm sure it does for you, is it's a very straight line from reactive oxygen species to the PUFAs to 4-HNE or whatever other lipid peroxidation compound we want to talk about to damage. These things go and then they react with proteins or what have you, and they break them.
Yeah. That's, like I said earlier, there's so much nuance out there with the push and pull of physiology But when you get to the end of a long line, right, it's hard to discount when you know, oh, there's damage. Well, how does that fibrosis happen? Or how does that DNA damage happen? Oh, well, we've got this way of measuring oxidative stress.
Yeah.
It's almost silly to talk about, to downplay certain things like, oh, there's a high omega-6 in that tissue. It's the healthiest. Well, it's the one that it's the big pile of pellets. Like, okay, so that person, that genetic signal for those folks that aren't oxidizing those things. Well, okay, let's go and, if you wanted to measure the sickest thing out there, it would be the tissue that is like most damaged by omega-6 fats, right?
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, there's a lot of secondary issues out there, right? There's, how much exercise that you get, that controls oxidative stress, right?
Right.
There's a lot out there.
How many matches are you lighting, and how much kindling is there to be burned?
Yeah, absolutely. But
how do you talk to patients about this stuff? Do you do that very much? How do they react? How do they?
So that's tough. When I first started bringing it up, the difficult thing is I noticed that your average. So when I first started doing this, I was in Eastern Kentucky, right? That's Appalachia. The average response would be something like, "Oh, I don't eat that stuff. I just use butter and olive oil." Right? That might just be what they buy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
They don't realize that every restaurant they go to is, and everything's soybean oil, right? And I probably had, because in residency, you're not just always in the clinic or always in the hospital. You're moving around. And my family medicine. So I said I worked during COVID. My family medicine residency was at like a medium-sized hospital. So I wasn't at a big tertiary care center, and I wasn't at like a teeny place. So this is just an aside for the medical folks out there. Like, we had a very robust family medicine residency. We did a lot of open ICU work and everything during COVID and everything too. So it wasn't all siloed. So, you're taking care of sick COVID patients one day and then you're in the clinic the other. But my point was that I had very few people that went through with this. When I started residency, I would tell people, it's a bummer to bring this up now, but I would tell people about the Whole30, WHOLE30, which was originally a paleo diet repackaged and kind of marketed a certain way. And there were the folks that started that were very successful with it. And you can go to your local grocery store right now and find things labeled. Long story short, now seed oils are considered Whole30 approved. It's kind of there is no principle at all to their what it is. But I would tell people that I didn't realize that seed oils at that point were still in it, or maybe they weren't. I don't know. Because I knew they could easily go home and Google it, right? The more you kind of go towards that. And I remember I had one patient that lost a good bit of weight. He was an overweight guy. I forget, he was like in his 60s or something, smoker, a lot of unhealthy things. And he was the one who was actually doing a lot of what I was saying. So right when I got seed pilled, right, myself, and I went from kind of that Whole30 perspective, just talking about whole foods with him, which, for anybody, you take anyone, I don't care if you're vegan or whatever, you go eat more whole foods, it's probably going to go into a better direction.
Your health. Probably a good choice. Yeah.
It's directionally accurate in general. But when I started talking about vegetable oil specifically with him, he had to get specific, and because he really he was taking care of his like elderly parent. He was already an older guy. He was taking care of his elderly parents. He had a lot of responsibility. He was honest with himself and with me about certain things he was cooking in seed oils. I fry the whatever that I like to do in that. Got the conversation got a lot more specific. When he went through with it and quit it, when I saw him again, I forget, 6 months later, whatever, he looked like a cancer patient. Like, wow. In a good way. Like when you see a big guy, right? Yeah. How often do you see a big guy become not a big guy, right? That's why I joke and say something like cancer.
And you're saying on the order of 6 months of time is what you're talking about?
I mean, because he lost a good bit of weight, right? But you could be a big guy and lose a good bit of weight. And people are like, yeah, you look good. But he was like skinny face.
Wow.
I mean? And like to the point where I'm like, he lost a lot of weight, right? So he didn't, everyone's, different with the way they kind of carry themselves when they lose weight. But like he went even further. because he was very motivated, and I didn't have very many. Because the truth is, you're not. The truth is, you're going to have to change things without people knowing, right? If more people are eating seed oil-free things, I think that could be really helpful, because we haven't mentioned this yet, but you're not going to be as hungry,
right,
if you're not eating
seed
oils.
There's a whole discussion that could be had there, but
yeah.
the omega-6s, among other things, connect into the endocannabinoid system.
Yeah.
I think there's a very clear story there that I've written about that has to do with endocannabinoid regulation of hunger.
Yeah, and if you're carrying body fat, is that just pressing that button tonically? Are you just tonically hungrier because you're bigger? There's probably overlapping mechanisms there. It's just like being full there's many different, you could talk about leptin and ghrelin and your stomach stretching and, all these different overlapping things. Like my daughter, she's autistic. We think that being full might be the only real thing that works well with her, right? Because she'll just be hungry all the time with her, whatever, neurologically how that affects her. But if she gets full, okay, now she'll slow down. She'd love to, she's very skinny, but she would love to snack all day and eat all day. But there's not just one thing that tells you you're full. There's overlapping mechanisms there. So, the epidemics they want to blame on you. Okay, everyone is now fatter since the 19. Oh, no, someone was counter signaling us the other day. No, people are not just fatter since the 70s. It's like, okay, well, go to a beach. All right, nice chart. Like, what about just being out in public? Like it seems like it was around the 1970s and 80s.
I mean, it's so it's like, obviously I'm a data guy, I'm an evidence guy, but also there's this Orwellian thing that's happening where it's like you become overeducated to the point that you stop believing the evidence of your own senses. It's like, look around you. I'm not saying you believe anecdotes over data, period, but like when the two conflict, you should stop and pay attention.
Well, look at some of the developing world too. I mean, just use India, for example.
Right.
The obesity in India, where they're not all just eating McDonald's and Doritos too. I mean, like, you're obese in rural India, and what are you doing? You're eating like rice and beans, and there's seed oils.
Right.
There's it is mass produced and it is everywhere, right? Not 100% everywhere, but it is everywhere now. So, people even in the USA, especially some of these families, communities that have similar cooking to their either where they moved from or their parents or grandparents moved from, and they cook at home a lot, whether you're from India or other places, and just great obesity burden. And they're not just eating fast food all day. They're cooking at home.
They're
cooking at home and getting very obese. And a lot of times even vegetarian, right? And that's fascinating. So
do you see the culture shifting at all right now? I feel like in the past few months, I've seen a shift in the number of people that know about and care about the seed oil question, one way or the other. But I seem to be noticing things shifting. Do you have that sense as well?
Oh, it's absolutely in the normie sphere now. Yeah. I think we might just start to see the pushback, but I don't know. Like I feel like even if, hopefully, I got what I do on my X account has always been just whatever I'm enjoying. And since last summer, since the RFK thing, especially, I started getting really political on there. I don't want to just be a shit talking political account, but it's just fun. I probably should lean back into more nutrition stuff, but I'm afraid there can be a pushback, but in some ways it's like, that's unavoidable. Right. And it's not about me, right? It's, you've got, RFK Jr. out there talking about seed oils, but there's going to be some people that are going to push back, but yes, normies are bringing this up now. Like people who, my wife meets XYZ area. Someone the other day was like, because they very loosely knew that I had an account called Seed Oil Disrespecter. And someone the other day was like, oh, this podcast I listened to, they used the term seed oil disrespect. Is that your husband? And she was like, well, he's the one that like made an account with that term, right? You know, like he didn't invent it, but like he kind of popularized the use of the term. And then she got all excited, right? Now, that conversation between them two kind of came up a little bit over the last couple of years, you know, but she never really got into it, right? Until her influencer used the term, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's definitely, you know, everyone is like, this book that I want to read, like I keep putting around my head. I think the opening line is everybody's talking about seed oils. Yeah. So
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, my grandma knows about seed oils.
yeah. Of course, my parents, every time they remember, but my, you know, the classic from my dad is, so are the seed oils the good ones or the bad ones? Like he'll be like, oh, how's the seed oil thing going? Which one are they? You know, it's like, so,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully it's actually coming out soon, but about 3 years ago, we tried to do an app to help people grocery shop. And long story short, we needed a developer who was motivated and capable, and that's what we have now. That they, you know, because we want an app, we call it the CD app, that would something your mom could use at the grocery store to helpfully, you know, hopefully she doesn't buy, you know, soybean oil, you know, Italian dressing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or
yeah, there's one app now that's like it
yeah.
helps you find restaurants, and then it's like
Seed
the
Oil
scanner.
Scout.
Seed Oil Scout.
So our very, very first version of CD came out when he put out his stuff. And I remember he messaged me and he was like, you know, I'd love to have your support. But at that point, there was like a, you know, what's that called? That fiduciary responsibility. We didn't have investors at that point, but we came out with an app at the same time, roughly speaking. His was way more capable. And he was, I think, worked at like a big tech company, or the biggest tech company, one of them. And so, you know, he was very, oh, you know, okay. Yeah. I didn't know how much was doxed yet or anything. Okay. So, you know, when you're a Google, you know, developer, it's easy for you to do that. But is excited I was about what he was doing, and I'd love to like boost him. I think for the past 3 years, I've always felt like we're about 3 to 6 months away from doing something for real ourselves.
Yeah.
But we're actually, we got a great guy, and I didn't know I'd be bringing this up today, but because I keep getting burned. But you know, I think we've got something good that might actually work well now. Because the idea was, what could your, you know, boomer parents, you know, depending on your age, right? But you know, the theoretical, you know, the hypothetical boomer parent, you know, help them try to grocery shop. Because again, I think it's like that. There's so much could be personal for you. You know, potatoes might not be a good idea for you. At least, you know, if you've got 60 pounds to lose, maybe it's not the best idea. But if you're, you know, if you're at your point in life, well, that doesn't matter. Well, then guess what? Starch is not part of the conversation. I don't talk about starch in my, you know, if you and I were, you know, if this was some sort of medical conversation, if I was doing some concierge medicine and you had 100 pounds to lose, I probably would recommend low carb and low omega-6 as a combination, right? But, you know, omega-6 is the thing. That's what I talk about. I think it's important. I think it's 80-20, and just, you know, just finding seed oil free. You know, I don't think everyone should just eat boxed items with seed oils in all the time. But if you eat mostly, like, what is the average person? The average person that somewhat gives a shit about their health is going to cook most of the time, or at least a good bit of time. They're going to go to restaurants and try to get the better options, right? Mm-hmm. And that you need to just, you know, you need apps that are going to point you to the restaurants. You need apps or whatever information on the internet that's going to point you towards the box stuff. And there's going to be people out there like, well, if you're just eating whole foods, you don't need that. It's like, okay, good for you. Like, you live on a farm and don't go anywhere, right? You probably do. You go to restaurants and you want to eat a cracker. If you go to go to a winery and, you know, you want to eat some food or whatever, right? It'd be nice to eat something that doesn't have soybean oil in it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And you'd be surprised. Like, I was at a restaurant recently, and I just told them I had an allergy, even though I don't actually have an allergy. And they're like, "Oh, the bread has soybean oil." And I'm like, "Why does your bread have soybean oil?"
Yeah. We went to there's like a nicer, not nicest, but a nicer Italian place in town. And we just, you know, we just got sick of it. This was like, I don't know, late last year or earlier this year, I forget. Like, let's just go. All right. So we ask everything. The general manager finally came out. Everything had seed oils, except for if you wanted a piece of fish because it was not marinated yet.
Yeah.
And like they like toss, you like put a little oil in pasta sauce and stick together like everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I'm not really impressed by human controlled trials out there because everyone is it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's in everything, and everyone's got a high omega-6 diet.
And fundamentally, this is driven largely by economics, right? Like they're putting this in everything because it's the cheapest option
for producing
thing.
Yeah, it's the cheapest thing.
So are subsidies for the soybean people? Is that part of the issue here politically, or what?
Yeah, like as exciting as it is that someone like RFK Jr. is in there and saying these things, I hope that it changes the conversation moving forward. I hope that the left, Democrats, want to have more of this "Make America Healthy." They're not going to use that because that phrase would be toxic to them. But just have that concept of food first, right? Food first. That's a good one, right? Hopefully that there's more of that out there, because this could so easily just go right back to people that don't take that really seriously. Because, with you think they're going to want to talk about not growing as much corn and not growing as many soybeans? I mean, with the every time we try to figure out who the new president will be, we've got the Iowa caucuses. Like, so not only is it presidential politics, but it's like early presidential politics. Mm-hmm. It's the low hanging fruit of the things that they're going to talk about, so I don't know. It seems to me like, I'm going to bring up the gluten thing again. If we meme this enough, there's going to be a market enough out there, because you're just going to have to be in that boat. I think if you're going to want to, because even relatively fit people, low body fat, good muscle mass, have the advanced heart disease, have the,
yes,
there's a guy on the,
there's still people that you would otherwise call fit who are getting diseases. And it's like, wait a minute, why would that be?
Before COVID.
Yeah. Before
there was people where this was happening to them in 2019. I think it's important that there's other important discussions out there, like how giving every single person, even healthy 6-month-old babies, the COVID shot was ill-advised and probably criminal in a lot of ways. But this phenomenon of people having heart attacks and strokes and everything, this was growing. This was around in 2019. And there's one guy who, with full name and everything posted on the internet before, how he called himself the carnivore kid. I think he was in his 50s, very low body fat. I mean, like, he looked like the healthiest guy. Like you would put him in as a picture of the healthiest CrossFit guy, right? Physique and everything. And his Apple Watch, I think, caught like atrial fibrillation or something, and they did a stress test or something along those lines. And then he had like 100% occlusion or something in his left anterior descending artery, the widowmaker.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, how did this happen, right? His omega-6 to 3 ratio was 15.
And that's, if anything, low compared to the average American.
That's on the higher end. Yeah,
that's on the higher end.
Yeah, other people would be yeah, sure, yeah, yeah.
My understanding was 20 to 1 or so.
It could be, yeah, but 15. I still consider that high, right?
Yeah,
because he was doing keto, right? And so keto helped him keep his hunger down. Keto helped him burn fat, I guess, in theory, or something. I know you really can get lost in the weeds and say, no, nothing ever matters ever, right? But he was eating a high omega-6 diet, and with low body fat and looking really fit, he had a big old clot in his coronary artery there. And I don't think we've said this out loud yet on this thing, on this podcast, but by cardiology's own, chain of events that leads to plaques is oxidized LDL. And some folks don't get excited about that, but I do.
Yeah.
If you had low oxidative potential, or at least greater potential to clean that kind of stuff out, I don't think you'd have that. The heart, this is my real dumbed down answer. The heart runs off of fat. Your lymphatic system even like cleans proteins and everything out and puts into the heart. But the heart, if you have hypoglycemia, you're going to pass out. You're not going to have a heart attack because your heart runs off of fat. So all of that dangerous fats that's one of the big areas it's going to go to and really deposit and get stuck. So
yeah, and in fact, if you are obviously if you've got a lot of omega-6s, then there's a lot that can be oxidized there. But also, if you're exercising, you can exercise too much, and that is going to introduce an oxidative stress. And so those two things together are not a good recipe.
Yeah, that's Now, I'm not going to claim to know about, in and out on every other risk factor. But the point there is you can be what
seemingly
looks
healthy
like,
person.
Oh yeah, seemingly like picture perfect, but the omega-6 issue can hurt you. So there's folks out there that call it the lean mass hyper responders, like some of those folks out there that are lean mass, right? And they do keto and their LDL is 300 or 400 or whatever, but I think what's more important is the lean mass hypercloggers. I humorously have done a little play on words there, because there's folks out there that their argument is there's folks out there doing that, they're healthy. And I don't disagree with them. I think that there are a lot of lean mass hyper responders out there that have high, actually, I don't know. That's what the research that they did shows. You can have a high LDL and be clean, but I'm worried that if you do that and have a high omega-6 level, right? So, and that's an underappreciated, the omega-6 question is underappreciated in the keto world, and I think it should be.
Yeah.
I've seen folks who are beef keto versus pork keto.
Yep.
And that's a very important distinction.
Well, what you're saying here is, if at some point here someone does the right study, what you would do is you would segment the keto folks that have high LDL levels based on their specific fatty acid composition, which is going to be determined by their diet. Some of them will be high omega-6, some of them will be low. Their ratio might be different in terms of 6-3, 1-1 versus 10-1, and so forth. And you're saying that you would expect very different outcomes from those people, even if they had otherwise similar total LDL levels.
Yeah. I mean, and this is obviously a unique scenario, right? Yeah. Folks that are really hammering on the ketogenic, right? And on a certain level too, I'm even, Rob Wolf and some other folks, I've talked to them personally about this. They are eating overall low omega-6, and they have found that supplementing with a little bit of sesame oil has helped them in like generating ketones. I think that that's a very narrow band phenomenon. It doesn't mean like omega-6 doesn't matter. If you're overall eating a low omega-6 diet and you're like a ketogenic person and you've got certain like physical ailments where high ketones helps you, and you're just doing a little bit of sesame oil in order to, increase your ketones, right? That doesn't negate the omega-6 question, right? Mm-hmm. That's a very specific way of juicing that system, I think. It doesn't mean like, oh, well, now I should just put soybean oil in everything. I should just eat bacon every morning. And, anecdotally, I've had a lot of keto folks tell me when they did the low omega-6, it really opened some doors for them. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Brian, last question for you. What makes a good meme?
Makes a good meme. So something everyone already knows. If you can take a joke that's already funny and just make it about seed oils, it's like, that's good, right? So a lot of, even in the meme world, like we always like steal templates, right? So a lot of memes that I've made, I've just gone, I'm not a Reddit person, but I've stolen memes from Reddit, right? Or I'll just take like, a lot of memes can just be like a trend, right? That's what's popular on TikTok. Oh, here's a new dance. Well, the new, we do it on Twitter all the time. Like there's like a funny meme trend of this thing, right? And then I'll just, for me, the joke was, and this is the meme, it's free real estate. I was the one that almost, other people were doing it too, but I really kind of coined the seed oil meme, right? I really kind of hammered it home in a way. And so something is already funny. And then the other, then from there, I think it's just, principles of humor, like good contrast. Like sometimes I've posted something and I delete it right away because I'm like, no, actually I had to add a little contrast. Having various aspects to it. You don't want to just be like A and B. Like you want to be like A and B and C and D, right? 7 things would be too much, but like 3 elements that are kind of funny. just having a little bit of story there. Making people feel clever is good. But sometimes just even what's fun about the seed oil thing is sometimes just being like really dumb and bold. Like just when I started first putting just canola oil bottles in certain things, like it was just like way over the top. It just seemed ridiculous. And that was a lot of fun. So comedy is a lot of exaggeration, right? I mean, that's why the sunburn thing is funny. Like when I first started, I was in residency and I was really busy. I didn't have Photoshop, so a friend of mine who was, he was a programmer, so he worked from home. He would help me Photoshop some stuff. So I would have an idea and I would like text him the idea. So when we first did the, that left-wing thing, like in this house, we believe,
the front lawn sign.
Women. Yeah, the front lawn sign. Yeah. So I had the idea of turning that into like the seed oil thing, right? But I didn't physically make it. I was like at work. So buddy mine we went back and forth on the text, seed oil should be illegal and animal fats are healthy and all that. And, but that was mockery and it was hilarious. And it's still funny. Every time I post that, it's still funny, and that was a lot of fun. I haven't, it's about now, I started working a little extra, starting last summer, and just got a little busier in my life. I started this meme account my last year of residency, which is a very busy time, carried into my first couple years as an attending, which is a very busy and stressful time. Now all these people, I'm responsible for their lives. Just now, a few years into it, I'm really, I'm 42 and I'm just kind of settling into my career. But what I was doing on Twitter was just, it was for me, it helped other people, but the motivation behind it was for me. I quit seed oils. Mm-hmm. I was not ordering French fries at the restaurant anymore. I was being picky about whatever. I was having to, and my wife together and our daughter, because, a lot of this is personal with our daughter. She has a mitochondrial issue, and I read about how a high omega-6 diet hurts your mitochondria. Well, my daughter's got a, deletion in complex 1 of her electron transport chain. Like, okay, well, I'm going to take that freaking seriously. I want her to eat a low omega-6 diet, right? So that's personal with her. And some of her, it hasn't been a breakthrough. It's not like she went from not talking to talking, but she does when she quit seed oils, there was some improvements with some things. Like she learned to use actually I got one right here. It was on some of my games. She had learned to use a PlayStation controller, which is, she doesn't, like a lot of the autistic kids, she doesn't point at things. Everything's very concrete. Well, she learned how to do an abstract thing, which is use a controller.
Right.
On the TV. And she quit seed oils and she got pretty smart with that. Now, I don't know. But one thing I do know is that, it can hurt mitochondria. We can see that in research, and I want to be able to protect her.
Yeah.
It's personal on different levels, just professionally and family wise and personal, me and migraines. And, it's a lot. It's just, it's endlessly fascinating to me. And so I love talking to other folks about it.
Are there any final thoughts or anything you want to reiterate about this whole topic before we sign off?
Well, I brought up the app. Hopefully that's out soon. I don't have any concrete things because we might just throw it out there. But CD app, SEEDY, because it sounds like a name of an app, right? That should help you find seed oil free groceries. I've been talking about this for years, but let's make it real this time. And then if that looks really good and that's doing well, I'll probably lean real hard back into the memes. I'd love to talk with you more, because in the limited time and attention I have for this, I would love for this to be something that we can make more inroads with different levels of the professional class.
Yeah. I agree.
This is a very serious topic. Just finding ways of making that more accessible and understanding, appreciated on a professional level. I think that's something we need to look into more.
All right. Well, Dr. Brian Kerley, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Nick.
Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. If you like to read like I do, then you should check out the ReadWise app. It's totally free to download, and if you go through the link in the episode description or on my support page, you can get a free 60-day trial for zero cost. ReadWise is a really cool app that allows you to import digital highlights from over 30 different platforms such as Kindle, iBooks, PDFs, and more. It makes it really easy for you to review and find and share excerpts and quotes from whatever it is that you're reading, whether it's PDFs of scientific papers or books that you're reading on your Kindle, and you can even save and use highlights from physical books. I read a lot of physical books before bed, for example, or when I'm traveling, and the ReadWise app actually integrates with the camera on your phone so that you can take a photo of a page that you're reading, highlight a specific chunk of text from that page, and export it to the app so that you can reference it or find it or share it later. They even allow you to export really cool looking graphics of some of the highlights that you have in the books or the papers you're reading so that you can share them in an engaging way. So check out the ReadWise app today if you are a reader and you like to reference and organize what you read. Go through the link in the episode description or on my support page or in my free weekly newsletter at mindandmatter.substack.com and try the ReadWise app 60 days free today.